Hello everyone and welcome back to the Step-by-Step English podcast. I am your host Alex, and today we are diving into a topic that might make some of you sweat. We are talking about mathematics. But do not worry, we are not doing a difficult math test today. We are learning how to talk about math in English, specifically looking at a 4th grade level. To guide us safely through the numbers, my amazing co-host and expert teacher Emma is here. Welcome to the show, Emma.
Thank you so much, Alex. I am thrilled to be here and to talk about math vocabulary today. Learning how to discuss numbers and calculations is incredibly important for daily life in English. It helps with shopping, cooking, and even understanding the news.
That is very true. I guess I cannot hide from math forever. I always struggle when numbers get too big. I can handle buying a cup of coffee, but buying a house? Those massive numbers make my head spin.
That is exactly where we are going to start today. We will talk about large numbers all the way up to millions. In English, we separate large numbers with commas every 3 digits to make them easier to read. We group them into ones, thousands, and millions.
Ah, so that is why there are commas everywhere. I always wondered if they were just there for decoration. So if I see a 1 followed by 6 zeros, how do I say that out loud?
A 1 followed by 6 zeros is called 1 million. If you have a number like 2, 500, 000, you would say 2,500,000.
2,500,000? That sounds like a very nice bank account balance. What if we want to add or subtract these giant numbers? You mentioned the 4 operations before we started recording.
Yes, the 4 basic operations are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Addition means putting things together to find the sum. Subtraction means taking things away to find the difference.
I know those two very well. Plus and minus. I use addition when I count my amazing podcast listeners. And I use subtraction when I have to pay my monthly taxes.
That is a very practical way to look at it, Alex. The next 2 operations are multiplication and division. Multiplication is like fast addition and the result is called a product. Division is sharing things equally, and the answer is called a quotient.
Wait, hold on a second. Quotient? That sounds like a fancy foreign word. Could you spell that in your head for me, or at least use it in a sentence?
It is spelled Quotient. If you divide 20 by 4, the quotient is 5. In 4th grade, students start doing multi-digit multiplication and division.
Multi-digit. That means a number with more than one number inside it, right? Like the number 42 has 2 digits, a 4 and a 2.
You are absolutely correct, Alex. So multi-digit multiplication would be multiplying 42 by 15, for example. It requires a few more steps than basic single-digit times tables.
Okay, I think my brain is fully warmed up now. We survived the large numbers and the mysterious quotient. What is the next challenge on our educational menu?
Next, we are going to talk about fractions. A fraction is a mathematical way to represent a part of a whole. When we write a fraction, we use a top number and a bottom number separated by a horizontal line.
Top and bottom numbers. I always forget which one is which. Do they have those special mathematical names that sound like movie villains?
They do have special names, yes. The top number is called the numerator. The bottom number is called the denominator. The denominator tells us how many equal pieces there are in total.
The denominator. I knew it sounded like a villain from a science fiction movie. Let us use a pizza to make this easier to understand. If I order a large pizza and it has 8 slices, the denominator is 8.
That is a perfect example, Alex. The denominator is 8 because the whole pizza is divided into 8 equal pieces. Now, if you are very hungry and you eat 3 of those slices, what is the numerator?
The numerator would be 3 because that is the specific part I ate. So the fraction of the pizza I ate is 3/8. See? I am practically a university mathematician now.
You are doing brilliantly. Things get a little tricky when we want to add fractions that have different denominators. For example, adding 1/2 to 1/4. You cannot just add the numbers straight across.
That makes logical sense. A half of a pizza is much bigger than a quarter of a pizza. It would be like trying to add apples and oranges together. How do we fix that problem?
We have to find a common denominator. This means we change the fractions mathematically so that their bottom numbers are exactly the same. Once the denominators match perfectly, we simply add the top numerators together.
Phew. Common denominator. That sounds like a whole lot of extra work. What if I do not want to use complicated fractions at all? Is there another way to write parts of a whole?
Yes, there is another very common way. We can convert those fractions into decimals. A decimal uses a dot, which we call a decimal point, to separate whole numbers from parts of a number. For example, the fraction 1/2 is written as 0.5 as a decimal.
0.5. I see decimals all the time when I go grocery shopping. Like when a bag of potato chips costs $3.99. That is 3.99, right?
Exactly right, Alex. Money is the absolute most common place we see decimals in everyday adult life. The first spot after the decimal point is the tenths place, and the next is the hundredths place. Converting fractions to decimals is a very practical skill to have.
I am learning so much today. Who knew an English language podcast could actually help me with my grocery shopping? What is next on our list? I feel completely ready for anything now.
Our next topic is unit conversion. This means changing a mathematical measurement from one unit to another. For example, changing meters into centimeters or changing grams into kilograms.
I really like the metric system. Everything is logically based on tens, hundreds, and thousands. It makes the math much easier to do in your head without a calculator. Centi means 100, right?
Yes, you are spot on. There are exactly 100 centimeters in one single meter. So if you have a piece of wood that is 3 meters long, how many centimeters is that?
Oh, a sudden pop quiz. Let me think for a second. 3 times 100 equals 300. So it would be exactly 300 centimeters.
Perfect mental calculation, Alex. We use unit conversion for length, mass, and volume in our daily lives. Now, let us switch from measuring straight lines to measuring corners. It is time to talk about angles.
Angles? This is part of geometry, right? I remember using a weird, clear plastic tool in school to measure these things. It looked like half of a circle.
You are thinking of a helpful tool called a protractor. We use a protractor to measure the space between two intersecting straight lines. We measure this specific space in mathematical units called degrees.
Degrees? Like the weather temperature outside? That is incredibly confusing for a learner. English has far too many words that mean two completely different things.
I know it can be frustrating, but context is always the key. If we are looking at a geometric shape, degrees measure angles. There are three main types of angles you learn in the 4th grade curriculum: acute angles, right angles, and obtuse angles.
Let me see if I can remember these from my childhood. An acute angle is the really small one. I remember it because it sounds like a cute little puppy. It is less than 90 degrees.
That is a wonderful memory trick, and it is completely correct. Next is the right angle. A right angle is exactly 90 degrees, and it looks like the perfect corner of a square. It makes a very sharp letter L shape.
Okay, acute is tiny. Right is a perfect sharp corner. That leaves obtuse. Obtuse must be the really big one. The angle that is much wider than 90 degrees.
Spot on once again, Alex. An obtuse angle is wider than a right angle, but smaller than a straight flat line. If it opens all the way to become a flat, straight line, we call it a straight angle. It measures exactly 180 degrees.
A straight angle. That just sounds like a regular line with an identity crisis. But I will accept the mathematical definition. Is there anything left, or have I officially graduated the 4th grade?
There is just one more simple concept to cover today. We need to briefly talk about symmetry. Symmetry is when a shape or an image looks exactly the same on both sides.
Like a mirror reflection. If I look in the bathroom mirror, my reflection is symmetrical. Or if I fold a piece of paper in half to make a cool paper airplane. The two wings absolutely have to be symmetrical, or it will crash immediately.
That is a brilliant real-world example, Alex. In math, we look for a line of symmetry. This is an imaginary line where you could fold the image and have both halves match perfectly. Some shapes, like a perfect circle, have an infinite number of symmetry lines.
Infinite symmetry lines. Because no matter how you cut a perfect circle in half through the center, both sides will match. That is actually really cool. I never thought of shapes in that way before.
Math is full of amazing hidden patterns when you know exactly what to look for. You have done an incredible job learning all this new vocabulary today. Words like numerator, denominator, quotient, and symmetry are advanced, but you mastered them easily.
Well, I had the best expert teacher to help me out. Let us do a quick summary for our listeners before my brain completely shuts down. We talked about large numbers and using commas. We learned that division magically gives us a quotient.
We also explored fractions and found common denominators together. We converted those fractions into decimals using the tenths and hundredths places. And we practiced unit conversion with meters and centimeters.
And finally, we became certified geometry experts. We measured acute, right, and obtuse angles with our invisible protractors. And we finished our lesson by finding lines of symmetry.
That is a perfect summary of today's lesson. I highly encourage all our listeners to practice using these mathematical words this week. Try reading the numbers on a store receipt aloud to practice decimals.
That is fantastic advice to end on. Thank you so much for breaking everything down for us so clearly, Emma. And that brings us to the end of another great episode. Thank you all for joining us on the Step by Step English podcast. If you learned something new today, please share this episode with a friend who is learning English. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button and leave us a positive 5-star review. Until next time, keep stepping up your English skills. Goodbye, everyone.